So to start this off on a more annoying note, I was hoping to be finished this video in particular a lot sooner than it was. But along with university not understanding that YouTube work should be a valid excuse from assignments, I had some laptop issues, and long story short, my hard drive was wrecked, meaning I lost everything besides my script, including the 2 weeks worth of editing that I'd already completed and some side projects I had in the works. But I guess the plus side is that I now have a stronger laptop that has a much better capability to play PC games, so that will mean more PC games will be discussed on this channel, and hopefully rendering and editing videos will go faster as well, meaning more frequent videos. And with that little diatribe out of the way, let's talk about NieR Automata. For a long time, NieR was one of those games that I would frequently see on the shelves of my local game stores, and it always caught my eye, but for some reason or another I would never pick it up. One day I finally decided to play it though, and I remember thinking how unique the game felt, even though it looked like your standard Japanese action-adventure game that had its bloom effect turned way up. The setting was extremely complicated yet intriguing, and the characters were all unique in their design and personal stories. Plus the musical score is one of the best I've heard in years. But I admittedly never finished NieR and eventually reverted to watching a Let's Play because, while the story, world, and amazing music grabbed my attention, the moment-to-moment gameplay felt janky and repetitive. However, when I heard Platinum Games were the ones developing the sequel, NieR Automata, with the writer and director of the first game, Yoko Taro, returning, I was eager to play this follow-up to a very odd and experimental game, and playing through the demo multiple times only reinforced this enthusiasm. But the question is, does the full NieR Automata live up to the potential? And why should you play this game over the multiple big AAA games that have come out already in 2017? Well, let's take a look at this niche Japanese game that a majority of people won't play. Now, the backstory of NieR Automata is complicated to say the least, because NieR itself was a sequel to a joke ending of Drakengard, another Square Enix game written by Yoko Taro. After NieR, there was also multiple novellas and a drama CD that were intended to expand on NieR's world. Not only that, but there's a Japanese exclusive stage play Yoko Taro wrote that is meant to bridge the millennia between NieR and NieR Automata, which includes events like aliens invading Earth with living machines, causing the remainder of humanity to seek refuge on the moon, who, over the next few thousand years, send down an army of androids in an attempt to take back the Earth, which is represented by these dancing women in front of a screen projector. So basically, even if you did play NieR, there isn't a guarantee you will know everything that's going on, which means newcomers can jump into the game without any real trouble, only losing out on the extra enjoyment from a couple recurring characters and themes. Your protagonists and primary playable characters are 2B, a highly literal straight-faced combat android who is dressed like she's ready for a Victorian Gothic cosplay party, and 9S, a more intellectual but emotional scanner type android. Basically, your typical aloof warrior and naive partner pairing.
And another thing, stop calling me ma'am.
Huh?
It's unnecessary.
Alright then. 2B it is.
Both are part of Yorha, the organization created for the sole purpose of reclaiming the Earth from the machines so that humanity can one day return. The two are deployed from the Orbital Bunker in order to investigate Goliath-class threats currently going on, and help the android resistance on the surface that are trying to fight back the machines, though things aren't so black and white. It quickly becomes apparent that the machines are beginning to become self-aware, learning human speech and behaving in a similar manner to how the humans used to, though there isn't any clear reason why this is happening, and the aliens that created them are nowhere to be seen. As the game continues, 2B and 9S delve further into the war between androids and machines, and are faced with multiple problems that cause them to question their own identities and what they're fighting for. Questions that are further complicated by other characters that have their own subplots and arcs, including the sort of traitor to the android movement, A2, who, by the way, is top-tier waifu material. While this may sound like familiar territory for some that are experienced with JRPGs, Automata finds ways to surprise and add a weird nuance to these themes, one of which is through its endings. Like NieR before it, Automata has multiple endings to be found, one for each letter of the alphabet, though only 5 of them make up the true ending of the game, with the rest being variants or joke endings, like removing your OS chip, causing your character to shut down entirely, or eating a fish that causes the android's bodily fluids to congeal. These don't add a lot other than replayability, but shows how much thought was put into the story of the game, and the different ways that players can act in certain situations. Without going into full spoilers, having different endings also allows you to see the story from different perspectives, revealing more sides to the plot, with ending A being the most straightforward in terms of narrative, and becoming more complex and complicated as you get closer to the finale, which I highly recommend getting to, as getting ending A and thinking that that's everything to be seen would be like watching the first 30 minutes of something like Inception and saying, yeah, I got the gist. And that's what I find interesting about Yoko Taro's writing style, as he writes his games in an off-kilter way you don't see in other video games. But that's also a strength of his. He uses the unique aspects of video games to do things you can't quite do in other media, like playing with the expectations of the player, shifting between different types of storytelling, and unlocking the story behind your weapons through upgrading them. And he does these things in order to touch on uncomfortable and darker themes like the ultimate futility of war or how we face loss. Yoko once said in an interview, "I design games and write stories, but my goal is to cause an emotional stir inside the player's brain. So the fundamental goal isn't inside the game sitting in its middle, it's the event sitting inside the player's brain. This is the goal we consider the most important." While it may sound convoluted, this thought process explains his approach to writing, as NieR Automata doesn't build up to one emotional climax through a normal 3-act structure, but wants to elicit an actual response from the player through multiple plot lines with their own philosophical questions, but offsets the seriousness with the occasional quirky moments.
Well, machines can't really make children. Neither can androids, now that I think about it. 2B? Little help here?
Huh? You're the chatty one. Work it out.
Oof. Wow, it's getting late. Let's get you home already.
This quality of writing even extends to the side quests. Rather than treating side quests simply as a way to pad the game out with fetch quests and collectathons, Automata uses them to tell compelling short stories that go into subject matter like the nature of violence and profiting off it, or if our physical body is even part of our identity. At a point, I wasn't doing the side content just to appease the inner completionist in me, but because I wanted to see where they were going with some of these smaller narratives, like the philosophical machine and his doubting female followers, or helping a couple of resistance members escape from the fighting, which has a really discomforting ending. That isn't to say that there aren't subpar side quests that just have you collecting materials, but they are in the minority. The only problem I ever had with the quests was attempting to decipher the hyper-minimalist map that looks like it's designed more for a topographer than your average gamer. Though I suppose that was meant to push players into exploring their desolate surroundings, something that in itself is a positive. Delving into Automata's world is one of the highlights of the game, especially when one can do so while riding on the back of the majestic moose, or wrecking machines with boar drifting. The Orbital Bunker that 2B, 9S, and the rest of Yorha operates out of has this sleek, almost discomforting cleanliness to it, implying how lifeless the organization is, which nicely contrasts the Earth's surface, which has been abandoned for centuries, buildings crumbling and covered in overgrowth, but is still full of life without the interference of humans. There are only a few remnants of modern culture left, like a dilapidated apartment complex lost to the sand, and a forgotten shopping mall that's being consumed by plant life, showing how long humans have been gone, which allows for some nice exchanges between 2B and 9S about the ancient customs of humans.
If we were human, we probably would have gone shopping and such here, right?
More meaningless conjecture.
You're so serious, 2B. You know that?
The openness to the world is something that Platinum Games' other character action titles don't have, making it feel more like an RPG, though the levels aren't so big that you get tired of traveling through them, which is helped by the variety of ways to move through areas. And like any proper RPG, treasures and materials can be found for those willing to investigate their surroundings. The game keeps exploring new areas interesting by shifting perspectives between 3D and 2D movement, allowing for some great looking set pieces, though there are issues with the latter, as it can be hard to see certain details about how to navigate the level when the camera pulls back from the 2D environments. I can also see people saying that the game isn't that colorful, making the environments look rather boring, since it's a lot of grays, browns, and greens, and that it's a bit empty to explore, but that's kind of the point. The game's massive landscapes have this quiet, serene beauty to them, but also highlights the struggles that have been going on for a millennia. Android resistance members that are found are struggling to survive on an Earth that's running out of resources, a few ready to give up, while the machines are having their own existential crises. Crisici? Some becoming incredibly violent, others just trying to live a peaceful life. And all of this is accented by the incredible music composed by Keiichi Okabe, whose name I likely butchered with my gaijin pronunciation. Now, I typically don't talk about the soundtracks of games as I'm not that knowledgeable on the topic of music, but I would be doing this game a huge disservice if I didn't, because this will likely be one of the best video game scores of 2017, if not the generation, along with Persona 5. Mixing a variety of vocals, piano, strings, drums, full orchestras, and likely a couple synthesizers, NieR Automata has this odd but entrancing style of music that would be hard to fit into one specific genre, especially due to how the score shifts between slower, calming melodies, faster-paced tribal music, and high-intensity electronica. One of the benefits of exploring the different areas of the game's world is hearing all the different background music, which all feel like they were scored with that one particular area in mind, and that is likely the case. Keiichi Okabe stated in an interview, the link to which will be in the description, that while he wanted to do something that kept elements of the first NieR soundtrack, as he knew how much fans loved it, he had trouble getting started with automatas, until he saw concept art for the game's environments and characters. Though for how much the music was based off the art, the game and story equally relies on the music. NieR Automata is a great example of a game conveying emotion through its music, dynamically shifting between a variety of musical themes and instruments depending on what the player is doing, or the scene that is playing out. Aspects of the original NieR's game was modified to work with particular pieces of the musical score, rather than the other way around, and I strongly believe that this was the case with Automata, as there are moments that feel like they were designed with the accompanying music in mind. The inventive relation between gameplay and music in Automata is something you don't see often in modern games, which makes it really stand out amongst its peers. Now, a lot of what I've already said can apply to the first NieR as well, but it was NieR's subpar gameplay that caused me, and from the sounds of it many others, to bounce off the game, so it makes a lot of sense that Yoko Taro and Square Enix would reach out to Platinum Games to help develop the sequel, as they're known for their polished gameplay and combat systems, even in their less than stellar releases, and that's still true for Automata. You start with the traditional light and heavy attacks that you can find in most other character action games, with a dodge ability that lets you avoid enemies' telegraphed attacks, meaning anyone who's played Bayonetta or Metal Gear Rising will have no trouble getting into the game. Though an extra mechanic is tossed in with your little pod buddy, and that's the shoot 'em up mechanics. In the first NieR, there was bullet hell gameplay mixed with the melee combat, but it didn't mesh properly, though Platinum gave it the right tweaks to make it work in Automata. Two of those tweaks being a proper lock-on system, which NieR didn't have, and your own ability to fire back, making it easier to deal with enemies that cover the screen and projectiles. So if you want to make the most out of the combat, you have to learn how to fight enemies while multiple bullets are flying at you, all the while using all the skills at your disposal, which can make some fights feel like a lot's going on, but it makes the combat that much more engaging as a whole. Along with the moment-to-moment combat, another thing Automata does better than its predecessor is that it's more focused in terms of game genre. NieR 1 attempted to play with a lot of different genres and the different tropes associated with them, like the Forest of Myth that is explored through a text-based adventure game, but I feel this lack of consistent direction is one of those things that kept some people from really getting into the game. That isn't to say there isn't a good amount of genre switching in Automata, but it's just more focused. Throughout the game, combat transitions between 3D character action to side-scrolling beat-em-up to twin-stick shooters and 2D bullet hell shooters, but all of the different sections maintain similar control schemes, and are just a way to switch things up. To some, this may feel like the game is ADD and doesn't focus enough on one particular game genre, but it adds a lot of variety to the game. Plus, it isn't that surprising, as this isn't the first time that Platinum has worked in shoot-em-up sections into their games. If I were to have an issue with the gameplay though, it would be that at times the change to the camera placement made it hard to see enemy actions, which limits your ability to properly dodge attacks. But beyond that, the gameplay is still one of the best parts of the game, as there's a lot of complexity to the combat, between the powered up versions of attacks after you complete a perfect dodge, to the variety of weapon combinations, which change combo lengths depending on if you're using something as your main or secondary weapon, and the extra mechanics that can be added if you find the right plug-in chips, like counters and a slowdown effect after perfect dodges. Even when fighting the most basic enemies, it's fun to see what combinations of attacks work best, or experimenting with the different pod programs that you can find. I'll admit that the combat isn't quite as good as Bayo 2, but it's still the quality combat that you'd expect from Platinum, and easily fixes the worst part of the first NieR. Overall, I have trouble finding any genuine flaws in Automata that doesn't feel like nitpicking. Admittedly, the Japanese voice acting is slightly better than the English, there was some technical issues with texture pop-ins, and some late game mechanics get a bit repetitive, but at the end of the day, this has been my favorite game of 2017. It's been a long while since I played something that got a genuine reaction out of me that was more than enjoyment. 2B and 9S's journey is the most compelling thing I've played in a while, and I had trouble putting it down until I completely finished the 30 hours worth of game. By the end, I had this hollow feeling, but in a good way, which I haven't had since games like Shadow of the Colossus or Silent Hill 2, and I think it's pretty cool when a game can do that. It may be a bit too early to name this Game of the Year. I mean, Persona 5 isn't even out in North America at the time of me writing this, but I think I can safely say that NieR Automata is my game of Q1 2017. I'm sure that Zelda fans will be knocking on my door with a crucifix at the ready any minute now, as Breath of the Wild should obviously take this award that I just made up, but with Breath of the Wild you get exactly what you're expecting. It's an open world Zelda game. Now that is hype and I've had a lot of fun playing it, but I have to give it to Automata because it tries to be different, and that's much more interesting to me. Even though it's extremely weird and at times hard to follow, it chooses not to conform to modern game design choices in order to tell the unique story it wants to tell. Oh, and you can see 2B's ass. Do with that what you will. This may be the most pretentious thing I have ever said, but I think the best way to put it is that Breath of the Wild shows how games can be fun, while NieR Automata shows how games can be more than that. And admittedly, that may not be for everybody, but I think this is a game that everybody should at least take a look at, especially those who love story in video games. But hey, thanks for listening to me wax poetic for almost 20 minutes. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can always subscribe to keep up to date with my other stuff. I'm hoping to have some Persona 5 videos out soon, along with a couple editorials. Or you can follow me on the Twitters. And if you want to hear more of me right now, here are some links to some other videos. Oh crap, the Zelda fans found me. I gotta go. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.